So I'd like to begin by talking about the purpose of a grant application. So what is a research grant application? Well, firstly, it is not a research paper, so it's not writing up the findings of research for a learned journal. It's not a research protocol, which is basically the operationalizing of your research grant application with all the nitty-gritty detail. And it's not an ethics application, because obviously that has a very specific role. It's basically an application for money, it's competitive, and it's a sales pitch. So whilst you can just present what it is that you want to do in a fairly relaxed fashion, it's usually better to point out to people where the important bits are. So shout about it a bit. You must take your reader on an easy to understand, logical journey aimed at convincing them to spend thousands or millions of pounds on you and your project. So basically, it's got to be good. So a research grant application is a sales pitch aimed at convincing a particular funder that your idea is important enough, that you and your team are expert enough, and your suggested approach is good enough to successfully deliver something meaningful to them, and that what they will get will be good value for money. So what does a research grant application look like? Well, it has lots of different sections, and I'm sure you're very familiar with them. But the important thing to bear in mind is that they all support each other. So it's all very well having a fantastic wing, but if it doesn't have a motor on it, it's likely to crash. So if you want your grant application to fly, you need to make sure that all those sections are as expected. This is a typical structure for a National Institute for Health research application. Obviously, other funders will have different templates, but they will all have essentially the same elements. So you will obviously have some administrative details. You'll have abstracts, both scientific and plain English. You'll have details of the research plan, which will cover very specific things. You'll have something about dissemination and outputs and impact, and timetable, milestones, project management, regulatory approvals, the expertise of the team, and various other things, including patient and public involvement. A general principle of grant writing is that you should give the reader the information that they want when they want it. And that comes from Aldridge and Derrington, and they have a very useful reference called the Research Funding Toolkit, which I've used quite a lot in this presentation. And it was a bit of an eye-opener when I found it, because it really does get across the importance of sales pitch in your research grant application. In it, they talk about 4 key propositions. Firstly, the importance proposition. So this project is important. That's something you've got to convey. The success proposition. So this project can successfully answer the question. The value proposition. This project is good value for money. And finally, the competence proposition. This team can deliver the research. So everything you write in a grant application should really be supporting one or more of these propositions. So what is a good research idea? Well, firstly, it has to be novel. We're not flogging a dead horse. It has to be important. It has to be useful. And importantly, it has to be researchable. It has to be something that you can practically research. But important to whom? So in the case of applying for funding, it's important to the funder's remit. And of course, you can learn about the funder's remit by looking at the mission, aims and objectives of the funder. You can look at the projects that they funded. You can look at their eligibility criteria. You can look at their guidance notes. And it's perfectly fine. You could have a fantastic grant application, but if you don't pitch it at the right funder, there's still a chance that it simply won't get funded because it won't be within their remit. I think I can say that it won't get funded. Secondly, ask yourself, are you a credible applicant? So are you applying for an award at the right level for you in terms of background, expertise and track record? So for example, if you think about NIHR funding schemes, as an early career researcher, you won't be applying for a programme grant for applied research, but you might be able to apply as a principal applicant to the Research for Patient Benefits scheme, which is very supportive of early career researchers, as long as you've got a team around you who are supporting you in that endeavour. You have to have a team to cover all major methodological areas. So if there's a massive statistical element to your project, then reviewers will expect to see a statistical co-applicant. Otherwise, they will not be convinced that you can deliver the research. And it's important, obviously, that you have institutional support and that your institution is able to hold and manage a grant application. The work has to be good value for money. And I think the importance here is to justify the costs carefully. You can, of course, apply for expensive bits of equipment, but it's important that the funder can see why you need them and that you've done your best to get good value for money in terms of that piece of equipment. So a research grant application is a competitive sales pitch aimed at convincing a particular funder that your idea is important to them, you and your team are eligible for funding and competent to undertake the work, your suggested approach will successfully deliver something meaningful, and what they will get will be good value for money. But even if you have all of those things, unless you can convey these things to your funders, reviewers and panels through your writing, you will not get funded. Now, sometimes you do get an opportunity to be quizzed verbally on your application. For example, for a fellowship application, you will inevitably have an interview. But even to get to that stage, you have to go through some sort of shortlisting process. So what you have written on paper will be crucial to whether or not you get to that next stage. There is a big difference between having the idea and presenting the idea. Like a picture, a research grant application should not be jumbled up, unclear, difficult to decipher, confusing, or unconvincing. It should be clear, unambiguous, easy on the eye, easy on the brain, and convincing. As an RDS, I think it's fair to see we see a few very poor ideas brilliantly crafted, and you'd be surprised at how far they can get. We see a few poor ideas poorly presented. We see a few brilliant ideas brilliantly presented, and that is a delight to read. But what we do tend to see are a lot of brilliant ideas that are not brilliantly presented. Bear in mind that it doesn't matter how well your application is presented. If you have a poor research question, you are not in scope for the funder, your team are not qualified to do the work, your employer is not eligible to hold the grant, you are being overambitious or unrealistic, the research is not good value for money, you do not follow the guidance notes, your application is incomplete, or you missed the deadline even by a minute. Now, that does vary according to funder, but if for some funders, certainly if you don't have it 1 p.m. By Wednesday, you know, they'll simply not fund you. So the prerequisites for a successful grant application are, it's basically a competitive sales pitch aimed at convincing a particular funder that your idea is important to them, you and your team are eligible for funding and competent to undertake the work. Your suggested approach will successfully deliver something meaningful, that what they get will be good value for money, and you're able to write a well-crafted, understandable description of your work that will convince funders of all of the above. And that, of course, is what the Essential Guide to Grant Applications is all about.